All right, my friends, I want to have an important conversation with you. But first, if you don't know already, if you're living underneath a rock, I'm doing one video a day for the first 100 days of 2025. And today's topic is one that I think is just presumed. So let's kind of dive into it here. So, as real estate investors, I find that a lot of the squeakiest wheels on the internet, thought leaders, influencers, content creators, stuff like that, gurus, call it one of the top things like that, right? But I feel that the common conversation is, or the assumption, so therefore the conversations center around this idea that every real estate investor needs to scale, they need to buy. And so this is, I think, is a gross uh, misunderstanding. I think this is something, it's a generalization, and I think generalizations do not work. I think that, you know, this is why it's important who you learn from matters. Because for the first 5 years of my career, I just listened to the squeakiest wheels on the internet, and they were all telling me that I should do 100 deals a year, and I should aim to own 1,000 properties, right? Like that the more that I owned, the more successful that I would be. The more deals that I did, the more successful that I would be. And so then what did that demand? That demanded that I scaled. And what is scaling? Scaling is hiring staff. Scaling is systems and processes, so that you can delegate so other people can do it, i.e., staff. Um, I'm not talking about scaling towards efficiency. I'm talking towards scaling towards volume. And that's been a very predominant conversation in the real estate world. But I would argue and say that not every real estate investor should scale. I think there's a lot of real estate investors who would do fine having 5 rental properties. I'll be I'll be very honest and say that most real estate investors would do well with 5 rental properties, right? And that number may vary for you, right? That mileage may vary, depending on your needs, the area you invest in, all of that. But I think this conversation around scaling, number one, gets perpetuated by, especially, I think this idea gets perpetuated by, like, for example, a lot of the gurus who have affiliate links, or they own, or they white label, um, some of the software companies, right? So the software companies, these are like the prop streams. These are the, CRM companies, things like that. The cold callings, centers and stuff like that. The multi-dialers. There's a level there that you could go buy a software for everything right now, and before you even, got started, you could be at hundreds, if not $1,000 a month in subscriptions for softwares. And I for sure saw that, right? There was years ago that I had a guy who went to some real estate conference. He went to, I don't know if it was seminar, boot camp, whatever, and he learned from a, guru, and then he immediately scaled. He immediately scaled. He hired a staff person, and I remember he went out of business within 2 months because he basically his monthly expenses were very high. So much so that the staff member called me, and she was like, "You're the only one in the area that I know that's successfully still that's doing this. Can I come work for you?" And I was like, "No, I'm good. I'm fine." And I think the nail in the coffin was that he scaled too soon, right? Like, go do some deals first and then scale, right? Get some proof of concept, right? Throughout my career, one of the of real estate investing, one of the biggest questions I had to ask myself was, how big do I want to build this monster, right? Because if your goal is to have 5 rentals, and let's just say if you want to do it in 1 year or if you want to do it in 5 years, that looks very different. What if you want to own 50 rentals? Again, in 1 year or in 5 years or in 10 years? What if you want to have them all paid off within a certain period of time? What if you want to flip or wholesale 20 deals a year? Like whatever that looks like, this is super important, you guys. You have to define how big you want to build this, because that having clarity on your end goal is so necessary, because at the end of the day, that will demand, will you need support staff? What all would that look like? And I think so many people are being sold this concept, especially a lot of you guys, look, on the real estate investor side, not so much, but on the real estate business side, i.e., wholesaling and flipping, which I see them as different. On the flipping and wholesaling side, and even on the real estate agent side, right? Like real estate related businesses that, constantly you're getting sold that you need to, have more, softwares, or you need to do more, and you need to hire out more and delegate more and all that. And that's good and fine. But if you don't have very clear idea of what your goal is, that may be unnecessary, right? Unnecessary expenses, unnecessary efforts that you're doing. So, guys, one of the biggest questions you've got to ask yourself is, how big do you want to build the monster? And look, your action plan will look very different depending on what your goals are. And so this isn't anything new. But guys, I'll be very honest. I don't believe most real estate investors should scale. On the rental property side, I do not believe most investors need 100 properties. Again, I believe honestly 20 or less properties would do very well for most people. Most people, though, would do well with 1 to 5 rental properties. And then, again, it's going to depend on your lifestyle, where do you live, all those things. And then at the same time, people who are flipping and wholesaling, right? Different businesses have different economies of scale. My friends who flip, 50 houses a year, that looks very different for them, right? Very different. They have a full-blown staff, full-blown, I mean, very, very different than my friends who might wholesale or flip, you know, 2 to 3 properties a year. Very, very different. So, should all investors scale? Man, that's deeply personal. And I'm gonna call it out right now and say, hey, look, you know, this is something that you've got to ask for yourself. And please, please don't don't lean on, especially some software, some guru, some things, them telling you that you have to scale. This needs to be a personal question based on your personal goals, and then you backing out your action plans from there. I'm telling you so many times, the guys who are preaching scaling, what they're not talking about. So, for example, like 2 years ago, I got invited to speak at a mastermind with some bigger real estate businesses. They just happened to be here in New Orleans, and I got to go a little bit before my session, and I was speaking on doing creative deals with agents at the mastermind. Um, and on the back end, I got to stay a little while as well. You know what the number one conversation was with all these real estate business owners from throughout the country? This was in 2022 or maybe 23, something like that. The number one conversation was descaling. Basically, they had scaled too soon. They couldn't handle the overhead, they couldn't handle all the staff, and the market was changing. And so they were really trying to lean up, or it took them down the path they didn't actually want to go down. And now they're trying to right the wrong. Guys, don't let that be you. Look, don't just scale because someone on Instagram said you needed to scale, someone on TikTok or YouTube said you need to scale. What I'm telling you is you need to ask this as a very deeply personal question: is what are your goals for your business? I'm telling you right now, if your goal is to flip 50 houses a year, I am not your coach, right? I should not. Who you learn from matters, right? So then you need to align yourself, right? If you're like Courtney, I want to own 5 properties, right? If you're like, hey, I want to own 1,000 properties, right? You need to align with the people who align with, what your goals are. If your goals are not clear, that's where you have to start. So guys, should every investor scale? I'll be honest, I'll say most shouldn't. But that's a deeply personal question that you've got to get very clear on, but you can't answer that until you know where you want to go. All right, guys, that's my thoughts for today. Look, one video a day for the first 100 days of 2025. I'm sharing a lot of thoughts with you. I hope you're enjoying them. See you guys for tomorrow's next video.